Hello, welcome to Light from Above. My name is David Kenney. I'm the preacher for the Church of Christ in Wadsworth, Ohio. Today we're interviewing students from the West Virginia School of Preaching, and it's my pleasure to have Hayden Sherrell with us. Hayden, glad you can be on the show with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great privilege to be here.
Now you're getting ready to graduate.
Yes, sir.
West Virginia School of Preaching.
Mm-hmm.
But let's sort of back up a little bit. The first time I met you was at Future Preacher Training Camp in Alkire Road. Tell them a little bit about that experience, because that sort of leads into the preaching school, I believe.
Yeah, that was a very good experience, kind of getting the idea of what it's like every day to, get up early and be studying, the Bible throughout pretty much the whole day, and then have a little bit of extra time at the end of the day to study over what you've gone through, and at the end of the week have that the big tests, and that's kind of gives you a little bit of a taste of what the preaching school is really like. And of course there's also a lot of reading throughout that week as well, and so it was great that I've been able to go there. Was it two or three times, I think?
I believe
and
so.
So yeah, and I always thought maybe that'd be really a good thing to help prepare me, and I think it has. It's maybe not quite as tough, obviously, but
oh sure, no, I mean
it's definitely
that's a
good starting point.
That's 1 week versus a whole semester. So,
yeah, it's a whole semester. It's never ending at that point.
But I mean, it give you, like you said, it give you a flavor, sort of an idea of what preaching is like. Because some people think preaching's just nothing but you have the gift of gab, and it's just a big social thing. But it's a lot of hard work, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more than just doing that, for sure. On like once a week or twice a week, but throughout the whole week, a lot of studying and preparing for all the material, meditating on and just memorizing God's word, and all of that. It's a huge part of it.
Well, why don't you tell them a little bit about where you're from and where you grew up and some of your background.
Background, I might have as part of like where I'm from, just because it's all sort of a little bit difficult to say sometimes when someone says, "Where are you from?" Because I was born in Wisconsin, but I've lived in about 6 or 7 different states.
So now why would you be living in 6 or 7 different states?
Well, my dad is a preacher.
Your dad is a preacher. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I met both your parents and your siblings. Why don't you tell them a little bit about your dad's preaching?
Right now he's preaching in Michigan. He did start out preaching up in Wisconsin, and that's where both my grandparents on my mother's side attend. And so my grandpa's now preaching at that congregation. But it was kind of nice that he could start up there, be with some people that very close to my family, and have family there and everything. And he preached there for I'd say a couple years, and then from there, I think it was Illinois we moved to, and then moved to Michigan. And there he wasn't preaching, and we lived there for about a year. Then went down to Ohio. That was the longest place he preached at. That was for about 4 years. And now he's been preaching up in Michigan for close to 2. So altogether, it's been a while. I'd say probably about 12 years or so, maybe a little more than that, but my math isn't the best.
So the life of a preacher is something you're very familiar with.
Yeah, that's it's been nice being being able to see kind of what it's like in the life of the preacher. You see both how it can be very beneficial, and it's always very beneficial for sure. And you see the positives. You sometimes see kind of the negatives. It's not always walk in the park. You might from the outside look at preachers and think it's all pretty easy, right? You might just assume that you just get up and you preach a couple days each week, and that's all you do. But being his son and seeing that as my father, you can see it's sometimes stressful. It's sometimes a big challenge. So I think that's kind of helped me a lot to kind of prepare my mind for what could happen, to me personally, and maybe how I could react as well, seeing kind of that example that he set forth.
Great. A little bit, Andy Robinson, the director of the school, wrote a little bit about you. Let me just read to you an excerpt of what he said. I said, Hayden has done well as a student, and in his preaching ability has improved by leaps and bounds. Aside from preaching, Hayden is very artistic. His interests include drawing and creating music on some of the instruments he plays. He does a little entertainment with magic tricks. What, now he says artistic, he's talking about music. And what are some of the instruments that you know that you can do this with?
I've learned a little bit of guitar, and I just knew a few chords on there. I would have practiced it more, but the more I played, the more my fingers. I hadn't quite gotten that callus yet. You got to get that. Any guitarist really has to get that callus. But I've also played ukulele. Those are really the only stringed instruments I've played. A little bit of violin, but not that much. And piano has always been my biggest, main instrument that I've really gotten to get down pretty well, decently. So, and I play keyboard also. And ever since I was a little kid, I've been playing the keyboard. So I've always enjoyed that and just creating music and learning songs that I like.
Well, great. I imagine you probably had a lot of interaction with Andy on creating a music, because that's sort of his interest too.
Yeah. Once it's just amazing to hear all the songs that he's put together, and I've always kind of been fascinated with just creating like melodies and all that, and it'd be a great thing to be able to implement that into making maybe some hymns, getting words and then coming up with the melody and all that. I think that'd be one good way I could really put it to use within the church, maybe.
Now, just so we're clear, why don't you explain to them why you would not use a piano in a worship service?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't want to give somebody the wrong idea.
Right, that's definitely something the Bible doesn't ever say. It's a great thing outside of the church, but the Bible does give specifics on how we're to worship, and it does say that we're to sing and make melody in our hearts, and that's really all it says. So that's all that we should do. We shouldn't really add to it and assume just because it doesn't say we couldn't do something that means we can do it. But that's like just a lot of things in life. When you have a specific thing said, that the persons that said that one thing isn't necessarily meaning other things as well, but what they said.
Yeah, they're being specific. That's what they mean.
Right.
How did you come across the West Virginia School of Preaching?
It was when my dad was preaching in Ohio. We heard about it was a gospel meeting down, I believe it was in Medina, and some of the members of the church there, would once in a while go over to Medina and worship there. And Medina was kind of helping our congregation, supporting us a little bit, and so one day we went to the congregation there, and for a while I'd been thinking about going to a preaching school. I wasn't sure exactly which one I wanted to go to. I knew there was several different options, but I didn't really know that there was one as close as the West Virginia School of Preaching until I went to that gospel meeting, because there was a couple students that preached there. John Keith was one of them, and the director, Andy Robinson, also was preaching there. And so just getting to hear how they preached and getting an idea of some of the people from the school, and they represented the school very well. And afterwards talking to Andy, and he was encouraging me to look into the preaching school. And so the more I thought about it, the more I thought, this sounds really good. And as I was thinking about just all of the options I had, I can remember I continuously kept finding myself going to the website for the West Virginia School of Preaching and just looking at that school and all the information about that. And it sounded really good to me, and so that was all kind of what led me to turn in my application to go there.
What was the studies like? Were they challenging? I mean, we talked about Future Preacher Training Camp, and what was classes like?
That's for sure. I remember before I started going to the preaching school, Caleb had been starting to go there and go into Future Preacher Training Camp. His dad was like, "Yeah, this is a vacation for him." I'm like, "How's that? This is kind of difficult." Future Preacher Training Camp, you got all that studying and then the big tests at the end of the week. And I didn't quite expect the school to be as difficult and as challenging as it is. As much as everyone tells you, it's very extensive and there's a lot of reading, there's a lot of homework and all that. I don't think you could ever quite fully get it until you actually have that experience. And I just remember being thrown into there the first week, all of a sudden figuring out everything that I was going to have to do. It kind of blew me away. It's like, wow, did I make a mistake coming here? I think everybody kind of has a little moment where they might think, I don't know if I can get it all done, but you do make it through, and it's so worth it. It's a very good blessing. I'm happy, as difficult as it can be sometimes, that I can be there and have all the encouragement from everyone there.
Now, what have been some of your favorite subjects, classes that you've had?
Oh, there's been several. I've loved and enjoyed every class. Some of them I feel like are maybe a little bit more difficult for me. Sometimes I think maybe after I graduate, things I might have to go back, maybe study a little bit more, like the Old Testament, even though I really did enjoy studying like the Hebrew history. I think one of my most favorite classes was Christian Evidences, because that's always something that I think is important, but we don't always talk about that necessarily just all the time. And so it really is an important subject, though, whether God really does exist or not, because if he doesn't, then it's all kind of pointless. But that's really such an eye-opener to see that God, God exists, but when you go to take that class, just how much you can really prove that he exists and be without, any doubt that he really does. And that's a good class to take and try to, maybe teach to others. Maybe, sometimes it can be a little bit technical, but you can, basically break it down to be pretty simple, and it's not too difficult to see, how much evidence we have for God's existence, and it's definitely something we need to also teach the younger people, I feel. Another good class I thought was, marriage and family. I thought was pretty interesting and helped me to fully understand just how important biblical marriage is. And I'm not like in a relationship now. Don't have a girlfriend or a wife, but I can see just how the Bible teaches, the importance of marriage, and, how it's a really big commitment. That's something I always knew, but just going to that class really helped show that to me even more. And so those are just a couple of classes that I've enjoyed a lot. Homiletics 3, I think it was also, I'd say, one of my favorite ones that we had last quarter. Just kind of learning how to preach expositorily. That's kind of preaching I've always kind of wanted to learn how to do. Of course, I've always heard it's the most difficult, and it is kind of challenging, but it was so good to learn exactly how to preach that way. That's kind of the way that my dad has always tried to preach, is stick with a big passage of the Bible. And he was really encouraged by a preacher friend of ours up in Wisconsin. He's actually the director of a Bible camp that we go to, but he's been preaching for a while, and that's kind of how he preaches. And that's kind of, he was one of the people that encouraged my dad to go into preaching, and has influenced him in a big way with how he preaches as well. So he's had a big impact in our life. And so I'd been looking forward so much to taking that class and learning the art, you could say, maybe, of preaching expositorily. So
when and where did you preach your first sermon?
It was in Illinois, and we were renting like a small little room where we were worshiping at, and there's just a few of us at the time. But my dad was like, you're a Christian now. You've been baptized. Would you like to preach? And at first, I was quite nervous. The first time you get up to speak, and so I was like, I don't know, but I decided to get up and try it. And I was about 14 years old at the time, so I was still a little bit young. But the more I did it, the more you find that it's a really good thing. And of course, you don't get as nervous, the more you practice and try it. So that's kind of a nice thing too about having my dad as a preacher, is sometimes he's said things like, you want to preach, and I've had these opportunities to be able to preach, and he'll let me kind of fill in for him once in a while. So So I've preached quite a bit since I was 14. So I've had a pretty decent amount of experience before coming to school. So that's helped me a lot.
Now the school, just maybe there's somebody out there that they have no experience. I mean, you've had a lot of experience through the benefit of your parents, and also future preaching training camp and all that. But what if somebody, they're a Christian, they think they want to preach, they haven't done a lot of it. Is the school accessible to them? I mean, are they going to be able to go to school there? And they take people pretty much from the ground up, right?
Right. Yeah, I think anyone who would really want to go there, it is very good. Would be a very good experience for them, and they can just learn so much about the Bible. And I'd definitely recommend it to someone who wants to go. There'd be some advice I'd try to give them about it. Of course, you have to raise up so much support to be able to go there, and be sure that you can have enough maybe congregations helping you out, which is very nice if you can get all the congregations around that maybe or just friends help you with that. And it's so worth it for for really anyone, I would say.
Now, obviously you're in class all the time, a lot of the time, and you have some individual time, but they also try to get you out and preach for area congregations. What were some of the area congregations you preached for, and what was your experience with that?
Yeah, I've preached at quite a few. Couple up in Pennsylvania, just kind of all around West Virginia, over in Maryland, and especially here in Ohio. And it's been such a wonderful experience getting to know other Christians around the area and being encouraged by them, and being able to just have the opportunity to preach regularly, which I'd never really been able to do before. It was always just kind of once in a while I would preach, but now it's about every Sunday I'm preaching somewhere, and it's a huge blessing. And I continue to see myself growing as well the more I preach, and it'll be hard, I know, when I preach my last sermon at those congregations, because I just have really come close with the people there and love and appreciate all of them.
So now you're getting ready, preaching multiple places. You can get by with that with a handful of lessons for quite a while, but preaching for one congregation and having to have 2 sermons every Sunday, and they probably want you to teach Bible class. They might want you to write for their bulletin. They may want you to do their bulletin. That's going to be a lot of material. Do you think the West Virginia School of Preaching has helped you to be better prepared to prepare lessons for that kind? I mean, that's a lot. That's a big commitment, and that's a lot of instruction. And you think you received that from the school?
Oh, for sure. I think I definitely have. That was always kind of a concern of mine. It's like I've seen the importance of preaching, and I wanted to get into it, but then I'm just thinking about how much you have to prepare for each week, and will I be able to get all that prepared in time? And I thought that'd be maybe one of the biggest helps of coming to the school, to learn how to do that. And I definitely think it's helped me so much to make sure I can prepare everything, and you kind of have to learn as you go to have time scheduled, and get goals done and meet those goals. When you're going to get things done, then you don't have much of a choice. So it's definitely helped me, I'd say. Yeah.
Now, what are some of your favorite books of the Bible?
That's kind of a difficult question, because I love all the books. I mean, they're all obviously good, but I think one of my favorites has always been James. I like how just about every single verse in there carries such a very important lesson that for all Christians, or just for everybody. It's almost like Proverbs of the Old Testament. Every single verse is so important and carries a great lesson. James is almost like that in a way as well, and I enjoyed studying that a lot up at school. We had Emmanuel Darty teaching that, and he did a very well job And Psalms, of course, have always been one of my favorite books of the Old Testament. And we just recently studied that in class. And you can learn so much just going through all of the Psalms. Each psalm could be, just a wonderful lesson. And so those are a couple of my favorites. I'd say, of course, maybe Ecclesiastes and Lamentations, some of my favorites as well.
Now, outside, still within the realm of religion, what are some of your favorite writers or books outside of the Bible, but still religious?
I would say Kaufman has been.
Burton Kaufman?
Yeah. I've always kind of liked looking at his commentaries and seeing, how he explains things. I always thought that he explained things in a pretty good way. And for a while, I'd been teaching a Bible class for a couple years when my dad was preaching in Ohio, and that his commentary was very helpful. I like to read his works, and I've always enjoyed Wayne Jackson, of course, especially like going on Christian Courier and seeing all the articles he's written, and he's written so many great books, and he's one of those writers. It's like every time you start reading, you think of something new that you hadn't really thought of before, it seems, and he explains things really well, and he's probably my favorite, I would say, of all the writers. And we've had so many great books going to school. We've gotten so many good different biblical books that I've appreciated, and so many different good styles of writing, but very good and well written books that I'm trying to think of some other names.
That's all right. Let me ask you a different question. You mentioned your interest in music. What about hymns? What are some of your favorite hymns?
Sing and Be Happy has always been one of my favorites for sure. For a long time, that's been such, my favorite. Sometimes, days can just be kind of hard. Days might seem kind of gloomy a little bit just when life is difficult and stressful, but Sing and Be Happy always kind of keeps you, cheerful. And that's, there's always something to be happy about. That's just being, a Christian and having a relationship with God. It Is Well With My Soul is always kind of one of my favorites as well, especially just kind of hearing the background of that song a little bit, and the writer of it, how it's encouraging. His whole family passed away in I believe it was they were in a boat that sank.
Mm-hmm.
But then and singing that and having that in mind, it's very encouraging. You can go through such an awful tragedy like that and still, be at peace with God and
Matter of fact,
trust in God.
The person that wrote the music for it died in a train wreck not too far from here.
Wow, really?
Ashtabula County.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of tragedy, but good spiritual teachings from it. So you're getting ready to graduate June 15th, 2018. Here it comes,
it's
ready or not. Still have final exams to come between there. What's your plans after graduation?
I have plans to go back up to Michigan for a little while, kind of be with where my dad's preaching at, and like to kind of focus on maybe trying to evangelize around the area of Hazel Park, and maybe preach a little bit there, sort of be, preach once in a while, not necessarily a full-time yet. That's been, it's always been a big thing in my mind, like while going to school here, do I want to find a full-time preaching position right when I graduate, or kind of hold off a little bit until I feel like I'm more ready for that? And I think that that's what I'm going to do, hold off. But I'd like to, maybe in about a year from now, look around and see if I can find a full-time position. I think that'd be good.
Well, Hayden, we wish you all the best, and thanks for coming into our studio.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for watching our program, and hope you have a great day. Before we close our program today, we'd like to take a moment and review this roadmap to heaven with you, since the matter is so serious. There are many incorrect set of directions out there, and sadly, so many people are following them. For example, some people have been given wrong turns. They believe things such as faith only, works only, or grace only. Or some attempt to change the order of the turns, being baptized before they even believe. Some people fail to realize what point they are on the map. Don't even open their Bibles yet, and they think they're saved already. As a person travels in a car or takes a hike, has to follow the proper directions, so we must follow the proper directions to heaven. Let's take a look at the directions on our roadmap to heaven here. You have to look at these passages in your Bible for yourself. We'll just list the steps, the turns on the way. First is to believe or to have faith. And then number 2, to repent, to turn away from sin. Number 3 is to confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Number 4 is immersion, or to be baptized, which is a burial in water to have your sins washed away. And then you're added to the church by the Lord, not by a group of people, or not by giving some kind of testimonial experience or things like that. And then once you're added, you need to serve and worship the Lord faithfully all the days of your life. And the key word's faithfully. You don't waver. And that's very important. We need to keep in mind, too, that in Noah's day there was a big flood, and only people in the ark were saved from the flood. The same is true today. There is no salvation outside the Lord's church. Where are you on the roadmap to heaven? Thanks for watching our program. Please let us know if we can assist you with further information for your journey.